A farmer's daughter stood up to corporate bulldozers, but 48 hours later, the governor's motorcade arrived at their gate with a shocking surprise. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The morning air held that special kind of stillness that comes just before a storm. Hannah Mackenzie stood on the weathered porch of her family's farmhouse, her fingers wrapped tightly around a chipped mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, where a line of heavy machinery sat idle like sleeping giants against the pale dawn sky. They hadn't moved since yesterday, but Hannah knew it was only a matter of time. The bulldozers would come, and when they did, everything her family had built over 4 generations would be reduced to nothing but dust and memories. "You've been standing there for nearly an hour." Her father's voice came from behind her, tired and worn, like the floorboards beneath their feet. Robert Mackenzie had once been a mountain of a man, but at 68, years of working the land had whittled him down. His shoulders still carried the broadness of his youth, but they slumped now under the weight of what was coming. "Just thinking," Hannah replied, not turning around. She couldn't bear to see the defeat in his eyes. Not again. Her father sighed as he joined her at the railing. "Got the official notice this morning. Clearwater Development isn't waiting for the appeal hearing. They're moving in tomorrow, legal or not." Hannah's jaw tightened. "They can't do that. The case is still pending." "They can and they will," Robert said, his voice hollow. "Judge Harmon denied our emergency stay yesterday afternoon. Says their permits are in order. Clearwater claims they've got to break ground on the reservoir project before the end of the quarter, or they lose their federal funding." "This isn't about a reservoir and you know it," Hannah snapped, immediately regretting her tone. It wasn't her father's fault. "Dad, they're building luxury homes and a golf course. The reservoir is just a pretty lake for rich people to look at while they sip cocktails. They're flooding our valley to line their pockets." Robert nodded slowly. "I know that. You know that. But Clearwater's got friends in high places. Governor Williams himself is behind this project." The mention of the governor made Hannah's blood boil. Philip Williams had campaigned on protecting rural communities and family farms, only to turn around and hand their land over to corporate developers the moment he took office. His face had been plastered all over the promotional materials for Clearwater Estates, the premier luxury development in the heart of rustic America, as if there was anything rustic about bulldozing working farms to build mansions. "We're not the only ones, Dad," Hannah said quietly. "The Johnsons, the Abernathys, the Reyes family, they're all getting pushed out too." "That's the way of the world now, Hannah," Robert murmured. "Little fish get swallowed by the big ones. Always been that way." Hannah turned to look at her father then, really look at him. The morning light caught the silver in his hair and deepened the lines around his eyes. This land had been his life, his father's life before him, and his grandfather's before that. The Mackenzie farm dated back to 1887, surviving droughts, floods, the Great Depression, and 2 world wars. But it couldn't survive Clearwater Development and Governor Williams. "I need to show you something," Hannah said suddenly, placing her mug on the railing and walking into the house. Her father followed, his footsteps heavy on the creaking floorboards. In the kitchen, Hannah's mother, Ellen, was at the table, sorting through old photographs and placing them carefully in cardboard boxes. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. She'd done all her crying weeks ago, when the eminent domain notice first arrived. "Morning, sweetheart," Ellen said, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just packing up the family albums. Thought we might want these close at hand when we move to the apartment in town." The apartment, a 2-bedroom unit above Gresham's hardware store. The thought of her parents crammed into that tiny space after a lifetime on 300 acres made Hannah's chest ache. "I'll help you later, Mom," Hannah promised, squeezing her mother's shoulder as she passed. She led her father down the hallway to what had once been her childhood bedroom, but had served as her office since she'd moved back home 3 years ago after finishing law school. Law school. All that education. And she still couldn't save her family's farm. Hannah closed the door behind them and moved to her desk, unlocking the bottom drawer with a key she kept on a chain around her neck. She withdrew a thick, manila folder. "What's all this?" Robert asked, brow furrowed. "Evidence," Hannah replied, spreading the contents across her desk. "I've been gathering it for months. Land assessments, environmental impact studies, internal emails from Clearwater that one of their junior associates leaked to me." She pointed to a map with detailed markings. "Look here. They've known for 2 years that the soil composition in the northwest section makes it unsuitable for the type of construction they're planning. Building there could contaminate the groundwater that feeds into the river." Robert picked up one of the documents, his eyes scanning the technical language. "How did you get all this?" "I made some friends in law school who now work for the Environmental Protection Agency," Hannah explained. "And some of the other families affected by this land grab have connections too. The Reyes boy works in the county records office. The Abernathy's daughter dates someone in the State Water Authority." "Hannah," her father said warily, "what exactly are you planning?" She met his gaze steadily. "I'm planning to fight, Dad. The right way, with facts and evidence and the law on our side." Robert shook his head. "Honey, we've already tried that. The lawyers said the lawyers we could afford weren't equipped for this kind of battle." Hannah interrupted. "But I am. This is why I went to law school in the first place, to protect places like this, people like us, from being steamrolled by corporate interests." "Against Clearwater? Against the governor?" Robert asked incredulously. "Hannah, be realistic. They'll crush you." Hannah's face hardened with determination. "Maybe, but I won't make it easy for them. And I won't stand by while they destroy everything we care about without even putting up a fight." The sound of vehicles on the gravel driveway interrupted their conversation. Hannah moved to the window. 2 large black SUVs had pulled up outside, and men in suits were stepping out. She recognized Maxwell Parker, Clearwater's slick executive vice president, from the community meetings where he'd promised jobs and economic growth, while skillfully avoiding questions about displaced families. "They're here," Hannah said grimly. "They're early," Robert replied, his voice tight. "They said tomorrow." "Bullies don't play by the rules, Dad," Hannah said, gathering her documents and shoving them back into the folder. "That's why someone needs to stand up to them." Outside, Maxwell Parker was straightening his expensive tie as he surveyed the Mackenzie farmhouse with thinly veiled disdain. Behind him, 4 other men waited by the vehicles. Hannah recognized one as James Whelan, Clearwater's head of security, a former police officer with a reputation for getting things done by any means necessary. "Mr. Mackenzie," Parker called out, his voice carrying across the yard with practiced authority. "I hope we're not interrupting your morning. We just thought we'd stop by for a friendly chat before tomorrow's proceedings." Hannah and Robert emerged onto the porch. Ellen appeared behind them, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. "Nothing friendly about it, Parker," Robert replied evenly. "You're trespassing on private property." Parker chuckled, the sound devoid of any real humor. "For about 24 more hours, yes, I suppose it is still technically your property. That's actually why we're here." He gestured to one of his companions who stepped forward with a document folder. "We've had a slight change of plans. The construction crews will be arriving this afternoon instead of tomorrow." "You can't do that," Hannah interjected, moving to stand beside her father. "The eviction notice clearly states—" "The schedule has been accelerated," Parker interrupted smoothly. "Governor Williams himself is eager to see this project break ground. Progress waits for no one, Ms. Mackenzie. I'm sure a bright young woman like yourself can appreciate that." Hannah felt her face flush with anger. "What I appreciate, Mr. Parker, is the rule of law. And what you're doing violates at least 6 state statutes and federal regulations. Does the governor know you've falsified environmental impact studies, Or that you've bribed county officials to look the other way on zoning violations? Parker's practiced smile flickered for just a moment. His eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on Hannah with newfound interest. Careful with those accusations, Ms. Mackenzie. Slander is an ugly business. It's not slander if it's true, Hannah shot back, and I have the documents to prove it. At this, James Whelan stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively toward his hip where, Hannah suspected, he carried a concealed weapon despite no longer being on the force. We're trying to be reasonable here, Parker said, his voice hardening. The development is happening. The governor supports it. The courts have ruled in our favor. All you're doing is making this harder on yourselves. He gestured around at the farm. This is prime real estate that will benefit thousands of people instead of just one family clinging to the past. Robert's hands balled into fists at his sides. This land has been feeding this community for over a century. How many people will your golf course feed, Parker? Parker sighed dramatically as if dealing with a stubborn child. Mr. Mackenzie, progress isn't always comfortable, but it's inevitable. Now, we're prepared to offer you an additional 10% above the already generous compensation package as a good faith gesture. All we ask is that you vacate the premises by sundown today instead of tomorrow. And if we refuse? Ellen spoke up, her voice quavering but determined. Parker's smile didn't waver. Then at 6 a.m. tomorrow, the Bulldozers will arrive with a sheriff's deputy to enforce the eviction order. Either way, this farm will be cleared. The only question is whether you leave with dignity and additional compensation or... He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Hannah stepped forward, placing herself between Parker and her parents. At 5'6", she had to look up to meet his gaze, but what she lacked in height she made up for in resolve. Get off our land, Mr. Parker. You'll get your progress when the law says you can have it, not a minute sooner. Parker studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. Have it your way, Ms. Mackenzie. See you bright and early tomorrow. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and I'd be careful about waving around whatever documents you think you have. Interfering with a state-approved development project could be construed as obstruction. That fancy law degree won't do you much good from a jail cell. With that, he and his entourage returned to their vehicles. As they drove away, a cloud of dust rising behind them, Hannah felt a tremor run through her body, not of fear, but of pure, righteous anger. Hannah, her father said quietly, what have you done? She turned to look at both her parents, their faces etched with worry. What I should have done months ago. I'm fighting back. Ellen stepped forward, taking her daughter's hands. Honey, they have all the power, all the money, all the connections. What can you possibly do against people like that? Hannah smiled grimly. I can tell the truth, Mom, and I can make sure everyone else does too. As the day wore on, the Mackenzie farm became a hive of activity. Hannah made dozens of phone calls, sent emails, and coordinated with the other families facing eviction. By mid-afternoon, her childhood friends who still lived locally had arrived to help, along with farmers from neighboring counties who'd heard about the standoff and came to show solidarity. They can't evict all of us, said Miguel Reyes, whose family's orchard was also slated for destruction. Not if we stand together. They'll just call in more deputies, Robert cautioned, though Hannah could see a spark reigniting in his eyes. The helplessness that had gripped him for weeks was giving way to something else. A cautious hope, perhaps. Or at least a determination to go down fighting. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields that had sustained the Mackenzie family for generations, Hannah stood once more on the porch, watching as people set up tents and parked vehicles in strategic locations around the property. Tomorrow would bring the Bulldozers, but it would also bring reporters from local news stations who had eagerly responded to Hannah's press release about the rural communities standing against corporate greed. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her former law school professor, an environmental law specialist who had become a mentor and friend. Documents received. Explosive stuff. Making calls to State Attorney General's office now. Hold the line. Hannah took a deep breath of the sweet evening air, rich with the scent of earth and growing things. Tomorrow would be the fight of their lives. But for the first time in months, she felt they might actually have a chance. Dawn broke over the Mackenzie farm in a riot of orange and pink streaks across the sky. It would have been beautiful, if not for what the morning light revealed. A line of heavy machinery rumbling down the road toward the property. Hannah had been awake for hours, coordinating with the growing crowd of supporters who had answered her late-night calls and social media posts. More than 100 people now stood shoulder to shoulder at the edge of the farm's main entrance, forming a human barrier. "They're right on schedule," Miguel Reyes muttered, checking his watch. It was exactly 6 a.m. Hannah nodded, scanning the scene before her. Local farmers in weathered caps and work boots stood alongside college students with handmade signs. The Abernathy family had brought their children, who were now distributing coffee from large thermoses. Old Mrs. Johnson, who had lost her husband last winter, sat stoically in a folding chair at the front of the line, her gnarled hands resting on a photo album containing pictures of the 4 generations who had lived on her soon-to-be-seized property. "Is everyone in position?" Hannah asked, turning to Sarah Kinsella, her former college roommate, who had driven 3 hours through the night to be here. Sarah, now a social media manager for a nonprofit, had been live-streaming the gathering since before sunrise. "Local news crews from 3 stations are setting up," Sarah confirmed, gesturing to the vans parked along the roadside. "And we've got about 2,000 people watching the livestream already. It's getting shared like crazy." Hannah felt a flicker of satisfaction. Clearwater Development had spent millions crafting their public image as champions of economic progress. Now people would see their true colors. The first bulldozer crested the hill, followed by more heavy equipment and a convoy of trucks and SUVs. At the head of the procession was a sheriff's department vehicle, lights flashing. Hannah's heart sank as she recognized Sheriff Bill Taylor behind the wheel. The Taylor and Mackenzie families had been friends for generations. Bill and her father had played football together in high school. Now he was here to help evict them. As the convoy approached the farm entrance, it slowed to a halt, faced with the wall of protesters. Sheriff Taylor was the first to step out, adjusting his hat as he surveyed the crowd with obvious discomfort. "Morning, folks," he called out, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "I need to ask you all to disperse. I've got an eviction order to enforce." Hannah stepped forward, acutely aware of the news cameras now trained on her. "Good morning, Sheriff Taylor. I believe you'll find that order is being challenged in court as we speak. My legal team filed an emergency injunction with the federal court last night, based on violations of the Clean Water Act." This wasn't entirely true. The filing hadn't happened yet, but her law professor had promised it would be submitted by 9 a.m. Hannah just needed to buy a few hours. Sheriff Taylor frowned. "Hannah, I haven't received any notification about a new injunction." "It was filed after midnight," Hannah replied smoothly. "I'm sure the paperwork is still being processed, but proceeding with an eviction, while a federal environmental challenge is pending, would constitute a serious legal overstep." She paused, letting her words sink in. "One that I'm sure you wouldn't want to be personally liable for, Sheriff." Before Taylor could respond, Maxwell Parker emerged from one of the SUVs, his face tight with barely controlled anger. James Whelan flanked him, along with 2 other men in suits who Hannah didn't recognize. "This is preposterous," Parker snapped, striding toward them. "Sheriff, you have a valid court order. These people are obstructing a legal development project. I insist you remove them immediately." Sheriff Taylor looked uncomfortable, caught between his duty and the obvious public relations disaster unfolding before him. Camera crews were capturing every moment, and the crowd of protesters had begun chanting, "Save our farms, save our homes." "Mr. Parker," Hannah called out, raising her voice to be heard over the chants. Perhaps you'd like to explain to the good people here, and those watching online, why Clearwater falsified environmental impact studies for this project, or why Governor Williams personally fast-tracked the permits after receiving over $500,000 in campaign contributions from your company. Parker's face reddened. Those are baseless accusations. Are they? Hannah reached into her bag and pulled out several documents, holding them up for the cameras to see. These internal emails show that Clearwater's own engineers warned that construction could contaminate the groundwater. You buried their reports and submitted falsified data to the Environmental Protection Agency. Sheriff Taylor stepped forward, his brow furrowed in concern. What's she talking about, Parker? Parker's composure slipped further. She's bluffing. This is a desperate attempt to delay the inevitable. He turned to Whelan. Call Judge Harmon. Get him to issue a direct order to clear these people out. Already tried, Whelan muttered. His clerk says he's unavailable until noon. A murmur rippled through the crowd as more vehicles appeared on the horizon. But these weren't construction vehicles or official cars. They were trucks and cars filled with more supporters, farmers from neighboring counties, environmental activists, and ordinary citizens outraged by what was happening to the Mackenzie farm and others like it. Looks like we've got reinforcements, Robert Mackenzie said with grim satisfaction, coming to stand beside his daughter. He looked different today, the defeated slump gone from his shoulders, his eyes clear and determined. Hannah squeezed her father's arm, grateful for his presence. This is just the beginning, Dad. Parker was now on his phone, pacing furiously and gesticulating as he spoke. Hannah could imagine him calling in every favor, pulling every string to get the machinery moving. But for now, they were at an impasse. The sheriff seemed unwilling to physically remove peaceful protesters, many of whom were his neighbors and constituents, without absolute certainty that the eviction order was still valid. One of the news reporters approached Hannah, microphone extended. Ms. Mackenzie, can you explain why you believe this development project is illegal? Hannah turned to face the camera, years of mock trial competitions and law school presentations helping her remain composed despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. This isn't just about one farm or one family, she began. This is about powerful corporate interests and corrupt politicians colluding to profit at the expense of ordinary citizens. Clearwater Development has systematically violated environmental regulations, manipulated the permit process, and used political connections to seize land that has been in these families for generations. She held up the documents again. We have evidence that they knowingly concealed contamination, risks that could affect the drinking water for everyone in this county. We have proof that geological surveys were altered to hide structural concerns. And we have records showing that Governor Williams intervened personally to override regulatory objections after receiving substantial campaign donations. The reporter looked stunned. Those are serious allegations. Has Governor Williams responded to these claims? Not yet, Hannah replied, but I imagine he'll have to now. The standoff continued as the morning wore on. More supporters arrived, and the media presence grew. Sarah's live stream had now been picked up by national news outlets, and Dr. Stanwith Mackenzie was trending on social media platforms. Hannah's phone buzzed constantly with messages from reporters, activists, and even a few politicians from the opposing party, eager to align themselves with what was quickly becoming a symbolic fight against corruption and corporate overreach. Around 10 a.m., Hannah received the call she'd been waiting for. Her law professor's voice was jubilant on the other end of the line. It's done, Hannah. The federal judge granted the emergency injunction. All development activities must cease pending a full environmental review. The paperwork should be reaching Sheriff Taylor any minute now. Hannah's knees nearly buckled with relief. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Don't thank me yet, he cautioned. This is just a temporary reprieve. they'll fight back hard. But you've bought yourself some time, and more importantly, you've got people's attention now. Use it wisely." As if on cue, Sheriff Taylor's radio crackled to life. He listened intently, then nodded to his deputy. With obvious relief, he approached Hannah and Parker, who were still locked in a tense standoff. "I've just received notification of a federal injunction halting all development activities on this property," Taylor announced. "Mr. Parker, I'm going to have to ask you and your people to pack up and leave until this matter is resolved in court." Parker looked as if he might explode. "This is absurd. Do you have any idea how much money is being lost every day this project is delayed? The governor will hear about this obstruction." "I'm counting on it," Hannah replied calmly. "In fact, I think there are several state and federal agencies that would be very interested in hearing the full story behind Clearwater Estates. Perhaps even a grand jury." Parker jabbed a finger in her direction. "You have no idea who you're messing with, little girl. This isn't over. Not by a long shot." With that, he stormed back to his vehicle, Whelan and the other suits following in his wake. A cheer went up from the crowd as the construction vehicles began to turn around, the bulldozers retreating back up the road from which they had come. Robert wrapped an arm around Hannah's shoulders, and Ellen appeared on her other side, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," her mother whispered. "You actually stopped them." Hannah shook her head, watching as Parker's SUV sped away in a cloud of dust. "No, Mom. We just bought ourselves some time." She turned to look at the crowd of supporters, many of whom were now celebrating as if victory had been secured. She needed to temper their expectations without dampening their spirits. "Listen, everyone," she called out, raising her hands for attention. "This is an important first step, but it's just that, a first step. Clearwater and Governor Williams won't give up easily. They'll come back with lawyers and lobbyists and every trick in the book. We need to be ready." Miguel stepped forward. "What do we do now?" Hannah looked out at the faces turned toward her, hopeful, determined, trusting her to lead them through this fight. The weight of their expectations pressed down on her shoulders, but instead of feeling burdened, she felt strengthened by their solidarity. "Now," she said, "we make sure the whole world knows what's happening here, and we get ready for the real battle." As the crowd dispersed and the news crews packed up their equipment, Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just painted a very large target on her back. Parker's parting words echoed in her mind. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. She had no doubt he meant every word. The question was, what would Clearwater and Governor Williams do next? Night had fallen by the time the last of the supporters left the Mackenzie farm. Hannah sat at the kitchen table, hunched over her laptop, her eyes burning from exhaustion. The emergency injunction had bought them precious time, but she knew it was only temporary. Clearwater's legal team would be working through the night to get it overturned. "You need to rest," Ellen said, placing a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You've been going non-stop for almost 48 hours. Hannah rubbed her eyes. "I can't, Mom. There's too much to do. Sarah's setting up interviews with national news outlets for tomorrow. Miguel is organizing a larger rally for the weekend, and I need to compile all this evidence into a formal complaint for the EPA and the State Attorney General's office." "You won't be any good to anyone if you collapse," Robert said, setting a sandwich beside her computer. "Eat something at least." Hannah was about to protest when her phone rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar number with a state capital area code. Her heart skipped a beat as she answered. "Ms. Mackenzie, this is Brian Landry from Governor Williams's office." The voice was smooth, professional, completely devoid of emotion. "The governor would like to speak with you." Hannah's eyes widened as she mouthed Governor Williams to her parents, who immediately moved closer. "Put him on," Hannah replied, trying to match Landry's cool tone. There was a brief pause, then a deeper voice came through the speaker. "Miss Mackenzie, Philip Williams here. Quite the spectacle you orchestrated today. Hannah straightened her spine. It wasn't a spectacle, Governor. It was citizens exercising their legal right to protest an unjust seizure of their property and a development project that violates multiple environmental regulations. The governor chuckled, the sound sending a chill down Hannah's spine. You're certainly your father's daughter. Direct and uncompromising. I admire that, actually. With all due respect, Governor, I doubt you called to compliment my character. Straight to business, then, Williams replied, his tone hardening slightly. I'm calling to offer you a compromise, one that could benefit everyone involved. Hannah motioned for her father to grab a notepad. I'm listening. The Clearwater Project is important for our state's economic growth, Ms. McKenzie. It will create jobs, increase tax revenue, and attract new residents. These are things our rural communities desperately need. Our communities need clean water and sustainable agriculture more, Hannah countered, which is why I'm proposing a modification to the original plan, Williams continued smoothly. We're prepared to reduce the development footprint by 30%, preserving the most productive agricultural land. Your family's farmhouse in the eastern fields would remain untouched. The Johnsons' and Reyes properties would also be partially spared. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. It was more than she had expected. A significant concession that would save at least part of her family's legacy. But something didn't feel right. And in exchange? She asked cautiously. You drop the legal challenges. All of them. You make a public statement supporting the revised development as an example of compromise and progress. And you turn over all documents in your possession related to Clearwater's operations. Williams paused. By tomorrow morning. And there it was. Hannah glanced at her parents, whose expressions mirrored her own skepticism. That's a generous offer, Governor, she said carefully, but I'll need time to review it with the other families and our legal advisors. This isn't a negotiation, Ms. McKenzie, Williams replied, his voice taking on a harder edge. It's a one-time offer that expires at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Think carefully about what's at stake here, not just for your family, but for everyone involved. The implied threat wasn't lost on Hannah. I understand perfectly, Governor. I'll have an answer for you by then. After the call ended, Hannah sat in stunned silence for a moment. They're scared, Robert said finally. You've got them on the defensive. Or they're trying to shut this down before it gets any bigger, Ellen suggested. Buy your silence with a partial victory. Hannah nodded slowly. And get their hands on the evidence in the process. She stood up and began pacing. Why now? Why offer this compromise after they've spent months fighting us every step of the way? Maybe because of this, Sarah's voice came from the doorway. She had returned with a stack of newspapers and was holding up the evening edition of the state newspaper. The headline read, Federal Probe into Clearwater Development Ties to Governor's Office. Hannah grabbed the paper. What? When did this happen? It's breaking news, Sarah explained. Your law professor's filing triggered more than just an environmental review. Apparently, some of those documents you provided raised red flags with the U.S. Attorney's Office. They've launched a preliminary investigation into potential corruption and bribery charges. Robert let out a low whistle. No wonder Williams is suddenly in a compromising mood. This changes everything, Hannah murmured, scanning the article. If there's a federal investigation, turning over our evidence to Williams would be obstruction of justice, Ellen finished, her eyes wide. The kitchen fell silent as the implications sank in. Hannah's phone buzzed again, a text message from Miguel. Check your email. Anonymous tip just came in. Big. Hannah quickly opened her laptop and refreshed her inbox. The new message contained no text, just an attached audio file. She clicked play, and Maxwell Parker's voice filled the kitchen. The situation is contained for now, Governor. We've identified the leak and dealt with it, but this McKenzie girl is becoming a problem. She has copies of the modified survey reports and possibly the financial transfers. Williams's voice responded, "Then handle it, Max. Whatever it takes. We're too close to let some farm girl with a law degree derail everything we've built. The Chinese investors are arriving next week, and they need to see construction underway. If we lose their backing, the whole house of cards comes down." "Understood. I'll take care of it personally." The recording ended abruptly. Hannah stared at her computer in shock. "Chinese investors?" Robert questioned. "What the hell is really going on here?" Before Hannah could respond, headlights swept across the kitchen window as a vehicle pulled into the driveway. Sarah peered outside. "It's Sheriff Taylor," she reported. Hannah hurriedly copied the audio file to a secure cloud drive and closed her laptop as Taylor knocked on the door. Robert answered, his posture tense. "Evening, Robert," Taylor said, his expression grave. "Mind if I come in? It's important." Once inside, Taylor declined Ellen's offer of coffee and got straight to the point. "You folks need to be careful. There's strange things happening. Judge Harmon's clerk called me this afternoon. Said 2 men claiming to be federal agents tried to seize the injunction paperwork. When she asked for identification, they took off." "Were they actually agents?" Hannah asked. Taylor shook his head. "I checked with my FBI contact. No agents were dispatched to the courthouse today. That's not all," he continued, lowering his voice. "I've got deputies reporting unmarked vehicles circling the properties of everyone involved in today's protest. And someone broke into the county records office an hour ago. The only files accessed were related to the properties in the Clearwater Development Zone." Hannah felt a chill run down her spine. "They're gathering intelligence, planning their next move." "Seems that way," Taylor agreed. "Look, Hannah, I've known your family my whole life. I might wear this badge, but that doesn't mean I'm blind to what's happening here. Something about this whole development stinks to high heaven, and it goes beyond just bulldozing a few farms." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. "This is a satellite phone. Can't be easily traced or tapped. My brother works for the state police. If you need help, call him. He's got friends in the federal law enforcement, too." Hannah took the phone, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Sheriff." After Taylor left, the kitchen erupted in urgent discussion. The recording, the federal investigation, the suspicious activities. It all pointed to something much bigger than a luxury housing development. "We need to secure that evidence," Sarah insisted. "If they're willing to impersonate federal agents, who knows what else they'll do." "And we need to warn the others," Miguel added. He had arrived shortly after the sheriff, bringing news that strangers had been photographing his family's orchard from the road. As they strategized late into the night, Hannah couldn't shake the ominous weight of Parker's words on the recording. "I'll take care of it personally." What exactly was he planning? Her question was answered at 2 a.m., when a deafening crash jolted her awake. The sound of breaking glass came from her office, followed by the acrid smell of smoke. Hannah leapt from her bed and ran down the hallway to find flames already climbing the curtains, fueled by what appeared to be a crude firebomb that had been thrown through the window. "Fire!" she screamed, rushing to grab the extinguisher from the kitchen. Robert and Ellen emerged from their bedroom in panic, Ellen immediately calling 911 while Robert helped Hannah battle the growing blaze. By the time they managed to extinguish the flames, Hannah's office was severely damaged. Her desk, where her laptop had been charging, was now a charred ruin. As they stood in the smoke-filled room, catching their breath, Hannah noticed something on the floor near the broken window. A brick with a note wrapped around it, secured by a rubber band. She carefully picked it up and unwrapped the message. In block letters, it read, "Next time it won't be just papers that burn. Take the deal or lose everything." Hannah looked up at her parents, their faces ghostly in the flashlight beam. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was a direct threat on their lives. Outside in the darkness beyond the farm, a car engine started and headlights cut through the night as a vehicle sped away down the road. Dawn painted the sky in muted grays, as firefighters packed up their equipment. The Mackenzie farmhouse had survived, though Hannah's office was a charred shell of what it had been. Sheriff Taylor stood in the driveway, notepad in hand, his expression grim as he finished taking statements from the family. "This wasn't kids or vandals," he said, gesturing to the remains of the homemade incendiary device his deputies had bagged as evidence. "This was a professional job meant to look amateur. They wanted to destroy something specific." "My evidence?" Hannah confirmed, hugging herself against the early morning chill. She had changed into jeans and a flannel shirt, but hadn't bothered to wash the soot from her face. "They thought all my documents were in that office." What the attackers didn't know was that Hannah had already backed up everything to multiple secure locations. The most critical evidence was safely tucked away on encrypted drives with copies distributed to trusted allies. Robert approached from where he'd been speaking with one of the deputies. "They're setting up patrols around the property," he reported. "Sheriff's got cars watching the other targeted farms, too." Hannah nodded, her mind racing. The 9 a.m. deadline from Governor Williams was just hours away. The attack had made one thing crystal clear. Taking the deal wasn't an option. Not now that she understood what was really at stake. "I need to make some calls," she said, turning toward the house. "Hannah," her father called after her, his voice tight with worry. "Maybe we should reconsider. These people, they could have killed us." Hannah stopped and faced her parents. In the gray morning light, they looked older, the lines on their faces deeper than they had been just days ago. The fear in their eyes cut her to the core. "I know you're scared," she said softly. "I am too. But if we back down now, they win. Not just the farm. They get away with everything. The corruption, the environmental violations, whatever they're planning with these Chinese investors. And they'll keep doing it to other communities, other families." "It's not your responsibility to fight this battle," Ellen insisted. "Yes, it is," Hannah replied firmly. "Because I can. Because I have the knowledge and the evidence and the platform to make a difference. If not me, then who?" Before her parents could respond, a convoy of vehicles turned into their driveway. Hannah tensed, half expecting to see Parker's suited thugs or more sheriff's deputies. Instead, she recognized Miguel's truck in the lead, followed by a dozen cars bearing volunteers and supporters. Miguel approached, his face a mask of anger and determination. "We heard what happened. Everyone's saying it was Clearwater's doing." "We can't prove that yet," Hannah cautioned, though she had no doubt he was right. "We don't need to prove it to stand with you," he replied. "The Abernathys are bringing materials to help clean up. My cousins from the construction crew are coming to secure your windows and repair the damage, and Sarah's already got news crews on the way." Hannah felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, all of you." "It's not just us," Miguel continued, a hint of excitement breaking through his anger. "People from all over the state are reaching out. The story's gone national. Justice for Mackenzie is trending. Whatever these developers thought they would accomplish with that fire, they've only made things worse for themselves." He wasn't exaggerating. By mid-morning, the Mackenzie farm had transformed into a hub of activity. Volunteers repaired the damaged office, while others set up a makeshift command center in one of the barns. Sarah had established a media area where Hannah gave back-to-back interviews, her soot-stained face becoming a powerful symbol of resistance against corporate intimidation. "We will not be silenced," she told reporters from a major network, standing in front of her fire-damaged home. "This attack only strengthens our resolve to expose the truth about Clearwater Development and Governor Williams' involvement." At exactly 9 a.m., Hannah's phone rang. Governor Williams' number. She answered on speakerphone, surrounded by her core team of supporters, including Miguel, Sarah, and her parents. "Your deadline has arrived, Ms. Mackenzie," Williams said without preamble. "Do we have a deal?" "No, Governor, we do not," Hannah replied firmly. "And let me be clear. If anything else happens to my family or our supporters, The evidence I have goes directly to federal prosecutors. All of it. The modified environmental reports, the bribe payments, and the recording of you discussing Chinese investors with Mr. Parker. There was a long pause. When Williams spoke again, his voice had lost its smooth confidence. What recording? The one where you told Parker to handle it, whatever it takes, and mentioned that if the Chinese investors pulled out, the whole house of cards comes down. That recording. Another pause, longer this time. You're making a serious mistake, Ms. Mackenzie. No, Governor. You made the mistake when you decided to sacrifice our community for your corrupt deals, and then you made an even bigger mistake when you tried to burn us out. William's voice turned cold. I had nothing to do with any fire. If you're making accusations like that, you'd better have proof. Just like we have proof about everything else, Hannah countered. Governor, I don't know what you and Clearwater are really building here, but I know it's not just luxury homes. Whatever it is, it's over. We're not going away, and we're not staying quiet. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Williams hissed. Neither do you, Hannah shot back before ending the call. She looked up at the concerned faces around her. He's rattled. And dangerous, Robert warned. If he thinks he's backed into a corner, then we need to find out exactly what they're planning, Hannah finished for him. Miguel, you said your cousin works for the county planning office. Can he get us the complete blueprints for the Clearwater project? Not the public versions, the actual construction plans. Miguel nodded. I'll ask him right away. Sarah, we need to identify these Chinese investors. Can your media contacts help with that? On it, Sarah confirmed, already typing on her phone. As the team dispersed to their tasks, Hannah's former law professor, James Bennett, arrived. Hannah had been his star student at the State University Law School, and he'd been her mentor ever since. Now in his 60s, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, Bennett had a reputation as one of the state's fiercest environmental attorneys. Quite the operation you've got here, he remarked, surveying the bustling activity around the farm. Hannah led him to a quiet corner of the barn that had become their war room. Thanks for coming, Professor. James, please. I think we're well past the professor-student formalities. He gestured to the map of the development zone spread across a table. Tell me what we're really dealing with here. Hannah filled him in on everything. The attack, the call with Williams, the mysterious Chinese investors. Bennett listened carefully, occasionally jotting notes in a small leather-bound notebook. This isn't just about environmental violations anymore, he said when she finished. We're looking at potential foreign corruption charges, maybe even national security concerns depending on what these Chinese investors are really funding. I thought the same thing, Hannah agreed. But why here? Why these specific properties? Bennett studied the map thoughtfully. Location, maybe? This valley sits at a strategic crossroads. Major highways, railway access, relatively close to the state capital, or it could be something in the land itself. Resources, geographical features. Miguel burst in, waving a USB drive. Got them, the real blueprints. He quickly plugged it into a laptop, and they crowded around as the files loaded. The plans that appeared on screen were nothing like the luxury housing development Clearwater had been promoting. Instead, they showed what looked like industrial facilities, massive warehouse structures, and what appeared to be a private airstrip. That's not a golf course, Hannah said slowly. Bennett's eyes narrowed as he studied the details. No, it's not. This looks like a logistics hub. Distribution centers, processing facilities, transportation infrastructure. He pointed to several areas marked with Chinese characters alongside English labels. And these sections? They're designated for something called Project Phoenix. Can you translate the Chinese text? Hannah asked. Bennett shook his head. Not fully, but I recognize enough to be concerned. This one refers to secure data, and this one to restricted access. Miguel looked up from his phone, his face pale. I just heard from my cousin. He says these plans were submitted directly to the governor's office for special approval, bypassing normal channels. And get this, they're classified as critical infrastructure under some new state security protocol. That makes no sense for a commercial development, Bennett muttered. Sarah joined them, her own research yielding troubling results. I found information on the Chinese investment group. They're called Horizon Partnerships, supposedly a private equity firm, but there are direct ties to the Chinese government. They've been investing in similar projects across multiple states, always rural areas, always with unusually tight security provisions. Hannah felt a chill run down her spine as the pieces began to fit together. This isn't about luxury homes or even typical commercial development. They're building some kind of facility, something they don't want people to know about until it's too late. And they need these specific properties because of the location and natural resources, Bennett added. The water rights alone would be invaluable for certain types of industrial operations. Hannah's phone buzzed with a news alert. She read it aloud. Governor Williams to hold emergency press conference at noon regarding Clearwater Development Project. He's going to try to get ahead of this, Bennett warned. Control the narrative before we can expose what's really happening. Hannah's mind raced. They couldn't let Williams define the story, not now that they were beginning to understand the true scale of what was happening. We need to go to that press conference, she decided. Show up with evidence in hand. Make him answer the real questions in front of the cameras. That's risky, Bennett cautioned. Williams controls the security there. He could have you removed or even arrested. Not if we bring enough press. Not if we make it impossible for him to silence us without looking guilty. Hannah turned to Sarah. Call every reporter you know. Tell them we have the real Clearwater plans and evidence of international corruption. Tell them to be ready for the story of their careers. As the team mobilized for this new phase of the battle, Hannah couldn't help but wonder what they were really up against. If a state governor was willing to go to these lengths, intimidation, violence, potential treason, what would he do when truly cornered? She glanced at the clock. Less than 3 hours until the press conference. 3 hours to prepare for what might be the most dangerous confrontation yet. The state capitol building gleamed in the midday sun, its imposing white columns and dome projecting an aura of authority and power. Police barricades had already been set up on the main steps where a podium bearing the state seal awaited the governor's arrival. Journalists and camera crews jostled for position, while a carefully selected audience of Clearwater supporters and state officials were being seated in neat rows of folding chairs. Hannah surveyed the scene from their position across the street, her heart pounding in her chest. Beside her, James Bennett was briefing a cluster of reporters who had responded to Sarah's calls, showing them copies of the true Clearwater blueprints and explaining the discrepancies with the publicly promoted plans. This isn't just about saving a few farms, Hannah heard him saying. This is about exposing corruption that reaches the highest levels of our state government and involves foreign entities with questionable motives. Miguel approached, his expression troubled. They're not letting anyone through the barricades without press credentials or an official invitation. We anticipated that, Hannah replied, though she had hoped it wouldn't come to this. She turned to Sarah. Time for Plan B. Sarah nodded grimly and made a call. Within minutes, a local news van pulled up beside them. A reporter Hannah recognized from their previous interviews jumped out. You sure about this? She asked Hannah. Once we do this, there's no going back. Williams will know exactly who leaked those documents. He already knows, Hannah replied. Let's go. Using the reporter's credentials, Hannah and Bennett made their way through the barricades as part of the news crew, with Sarah and Miguel following close behind. They positioned themselves strategically near the front of the press area, just as a murmur rippled through the crowd, announcing the governor's approach. Philip Williams strode toward the podium with practiced confidence, his expensive suit immaculate, his silver hair perfectly styled. Flanking him were Maxwell Parker and several other Clearwater executives, along with key members of his administration. Hannah noticed James Whelan scanning the crowd, his eyes narrowing slightly when they landed on her. "Good afternoon," Williams began, his voice projecting warmth and authority. "I've called this press conference to address some unfortunate misinformation that has been circulating about the Clearwater Estates Development Project. This initiative represents a historic investment in our state's future, creating jobs, expanding our tax base, and establishing our region as a leader in modern community development." Hannah couldn't help but admire his performance. If she hadn't seen the evidence with her own eyes, she might almost have believed him. "Some opponents of progress have attempted to characterize this project as harmful to our rural communities," Williams continued. "Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, today I'm pleased to announce an expanded community benefits package that will include educational grants, infrastructure improvements, and dedicated green spaces throughout the development area." As Williams detailed the supposed benefits, Hannah caught Parker checking his watch and whispering something to Whelan. Something about their body language set off alarm bells in her mind. "Now I'd be happy to take a few questions," Williams concluded, gesturing toward the press corps. This was their moment. Hannah nodded to their allied reporter, who immediately raised her hand and was recognized. "Governor Williams, can you explain why the actual construction plans for Clearwater Estates show industrial facilities and a restricted access area labeled Project Phoenix instead of the residential community you've been promoting?" Williams froze momentarily, his practiced smile faltering. In her peripheral vision, Hannah saw Whelan speaking urgently into a radio. "I'm not sure what plans you're referring to," Williams recovered smoothly. "The Clearwater Estates project has always been transparently presented as a mixed-use development, incorporating residential, commercial, and yes, some light industrial elements," the reporter pressed on. "Then how do you explain these blueprints, submitted to your office under special classification, showing what experts have identified as a logistics hub with Chinese language designations for restricted areas?" She held up enlarged printouts of the plans. Camera flashes erupted as photographers captured the moment. Williams's face hardened. "Those appear to be preliminary drafts that were rejected early in the planning process. They do not represent the approved development." It was time. Hannah stepped forward, moving into the space between the press corps and the barricades. "That's not true, Governor Williams," she called out, her voice carrying across the plaza. "These plans were submitted to your office for special approval just 3 months ago, bypassing normal regulatory channels. They bear your signature and classified designation." All cameras swiveled toward Hannah. Williams' face flushed with anger. "Ms. Mackenzie, I might have known you'd be behind this stunt." "This isn't a stunt," Hannah countered, holding up her own copy of the documents. "This is evidence of fraud, corruption, and potential national security concerns." "Why is your administration fast-tracking a development with direct ties to the Chinese government? What exactly is Project Phoenix? And why does it require restricted access zones in the heart of American farmland?" The crowd erupted in shouted questions as reporters sensed a much bigger story than they had anticipated. Williams gestured frantically to his security detail. "Remove that woman immediately," he ordered. "She is interfering with an official state function." 2 uniformed officers moved toward Hannah, but Bennett stepped between them. "My client is exercising her First Amendment rights," he stated firmly, "and raising legitimate questions about potential violations of federal law, including the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act." The officers hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding in front of cameras and dozens of witnesses. Williams attempted to regain control. "This press conference is not the appropriate forum for baseless conspiracy theories. Ms. Mackenzie has been engaged in a personal vendetta ever since her family's property was legally acquired through proper eminent domain procedures." Is it a conspiracy theory that your campaign received over $500,000 from Clearwater Development? Hannah challenged. Or that you personally intervened to override environmental concerns raised by state scientists? Or perhaps the attack on my family's home last night was also just a theory? The crowd gasped at this last accusation. Williams's face contorted with fury. I have never authorized or condoned any illegal actions, he sputtered. These slanderous accusations are... He was interrupted by a commotion at the edge of the plaza. Hannah turned to see several men in dark suits with FBI jackets pushing through the barricades, accompanied by uniformed federal marshals. Governor Philip Williams, the lead agent announced, approaching the podium. I'm Special Agent Thomas Reeves with the FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy, bribery, and fraud related to the Clearwater Development Project. The plaza erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted questions while cameras flashed continuously. Williams stood frozen at the podium, his face ashen. This is absurd, he finally managed. I am the governor of this state. And you'll have every opportunity to defend yourself in court, sir, Agent Reeves replied evenly. For now, I need you to come with us. Hannah watched in stunned silence as federal agents moved to secure Williams and several members of his staff, including Maxwell Parker, who shot her a look of pure hatred as he was led away in handcuffs. James Bennett appeared at her side. Did you know this was going to happen? He asked quietly. Hannah shook her head. I knew the federal investigation was ongoing, but I had no idea they were this close to making arrests. Before they could process what was happening, Agent Reeves approached them. Ms. Mackenzie, I'd like a word with you, please. Hannah followed the agent to a quieter area away from the main commotion, her mind racing. Was she in trouble for interfering with the arrest? Had she somehow compromised their investigation? I want to thank you, Reeves said, surprising her. The evidence you provided to the U.S. Attorney's Office was the breakthrough we needed. We've been investigating Williams and Clearwater for months, but couldn't crack the connection to the Chinese investment group until you came forward. So it's true, Hannah asked. About the foreign government involvement? Reeves nodded grimly. What you uncovered is just the tip of the iceberg. Project Phoenix is part of a multi-state operation that involves much more than land development. National security is definitely at stake. What happens now? Hannah asked. That depends partly on you, Reeves replied. We'll need your continued cooperation as a witness. There will be depositions, probably court testimony, and I should warn you, this isn't over. Williams and Parker may be in custody, but Clearwater Development is backed by powerful people, both domestic and foreign. They won't give up easily. Hannah thought of her family's farm, of the community that had rallied around them, of the truth that was finally beginning to emerge. I'm not giving up either, she told Reeves firmly. As they walked back toward the chaos of the plaza, where reporters were desperately trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed, Hannah caught sight of her parents pushing through the crowd. They had watched everything unfold on television and rushed to the Capitol to find her. Ellen embraced her daughter fiercely. Are you okay? I'm fine, Mom, Hannah assured her. Better than fine, actually. Robert looked from the handcuffed governor being led to a federal vehicle back to his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. What you did today, it was incredibly brave and incredibly dangerous. It was necessary, Hannah replied simply. As they made their way through the thinning crowd, Hannah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This isn't the end, just the beginning. Watch your back. Hannah showed the message to Agent Reeves, who frowned deeply. I told you this wasn't over, he said. We'll assign protective detail to your family immediately. Looking back at the Capitol steps where the governor's carefully orchestrated press conference had dissolved into a scene of arrests and scandal, Hannah realized that while they had won an important battle today, the war was far from over. Somewhere, the real powers behind Clearwater Development were regrouping, planning their next move, and Hannah would be ready for them. Hannah leaned back in her chair at the kitchen table, rubbing her tired eyes as she scanned through the dozens of news articles covering the governor's arrest. The Mackenzie farmhouse had become something of a fortress in the 3 days since the dramatic events at the state capitol. 2 FBI agents were stationed outside, rotating in shifts with U.S. Marshals. Additional security measures had been installed: motion sensors, surveillance cameras, and a direct line to the nearest federal field office. "More coffee?" Ellen asked, already refilling Hannah's mug without waiting for an answer. "Thanks, Mom." Hannah smiled wearily. Sleep had been elusive, her mind constantly racing with new developments and lingering concerns. Sarah, who had barely left Hannah's side since the arrests, looked up from her laptop, where she was monitoring social media reactions. "You've become quite the celebrity. Look at these mentions." Hannah grimaced. The public reaction to her role in exposing the corruption had been mostly positive, with many hailing her as a hero. But fame brought its own complications, including a level of scrutiny she had never anticipated. "Any more threats?" Robert asked, entering the kitchen after his early morning walk around the property, now accompanied by an agent, of course. "Nothing specific," Sarah replied. "But there's definitely a coordinated campaign trying to discredit Hannah. Lots of new accounts pushing the narrative that she's an environmentalist extremist, or a tool of foreign interests trying to block American development." Hannah wasn't surprised. Classic deflection strategy. Accuse your accuser of exactly what you're guilty of. The screen door opened as Agent Reeves entered, removing his sunglasses. Despite the early hour, he looked sharp in his FBI windbreaker and pressed slacks. "Morning, Mackenzies," he greeted them, accepting the coffee Ellen promptly offered. "We've got updates." Hannah straightened in her chair. "About the case?" "Several aspects," Reeves confirmed, setting his tablet on the table. "First, Williams and Parker have both been denied bail. The judge cited flight risk and the international dimensions of the case." "Good," Robert muttered. "Second, we've identified 3 more shell companies connected to Horizon Partnerships. They've been acquiring properties in 2 other states, similar rural locations with strategic infrastructure access." Hannah leaned forward. "So this is bigger than just our community." "Much bigger," Reeves confirmed grimly. "Based on the documents you provided and subsequent investigation, we believe Project Phoenix is part of a sophisticated intelligence-gathering operation disguised as commercial development." "Espionage?" Ellen gasped. "Economic and technological, primarily," Reeves explained. "The facilities would serve as data collection points, positioned to intercept communications and monitor transportation networks. The agricultural land itself was valuable for its water rights and potential to house underground structures without arousing suspicion." Hannah felt a chill run down her spine. What had started as a fight to save her family's farm had unexpectedly pulled back the curtain on an international espionage plot. "What about the other investors?" Sarah asked. "Williams and Parker can't be the only Americans involved." Reeves nodded. "That's where things get complicated. We've identified several high-profile business leaders and political figures with connections to Clearwater and Horizon. But these are powerful people with serious resources and influence. The investigation has to be airtight." "Are they the ones behind the threats?" Hannah asked directly. Reeves exchanged a glance with his partner, who had remained silently by the door. "Possibly. But we're also concerned about potential retaliation from the foreign interests involved. They've invested millions in this operation, and you've helped expose it publicly. That makes you a significant liability." The implications hung heavy in the room. Hannah wasn't just facing angry developers or a corrupt governor anymore. She had potentially made enemies of a foreign intelligence apparatus. A knock at the door interrupted the tense silence. Robert moved to answer it, accompanied by one of the agents. He returned a moment later with James Bennett and Miguel. "Sorry to barge in so early," Bennett said, nodding to Agent Reeves. But there's been a development you all need to know about. Miguel held up a tablet, showing a live news broadcast. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Lieutenant Governor announces Clearwater project will proceed under new oversight. What? Hannah exclaimed, taking the tablet for a closer look. Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Harlow stood at the same podium where Williams had been arrested 3 days earlier, projecting calm authority. While the allegations against Governor Williams are deeply troubling, they should not derail important economic development initiatives that benefit our state, she was saying. After careful review, my administration has determined that the Clearwater project, properly restructured and with appropriate oversight, can and should proceed. Hannah looked up at Bennett in disbelief. Can she do that? Legally, yes, Bennett replied grimly. As acting governor, she has the authority. And she's being careful with her wording, acknowledging the corruption allegations while presenting herself as the reformer who will clean things up. This is no coincidence, Agent Reeves said, already on his phone texting colleagues. Harlow wasn't on our radar for the initial arrests, but that doesn't mean she's not involved. Miguel looked ashen. So everything we fought for, everything Hannah risked her life for, it was all for nothing. No, Hannah said firmly, standing up. This is just their next move. They're trying to salvage the project while distancing themselves from Williams and Parker. Same plan, different packaging. And it might work, Bennett warned. Harlow is presenting this as a reasonable compromise, preserving the economic benefits while addressing the corruption. Public opinion could easily swing in her favor, especially if she offers token concessions to the affected landowners. Hannah paced the kitchen, her mind racing. They're adapting. So must we. She turned to Agent Reeves. What do your investigations show about the Lieutenant Governor? Is she connected to Horizon Partnerships? We're looking into it, Reeves replied carefully. But I need to be clear. The FBI cannot share active investigation details, even with key witnesses like yourself. There are protocols. Hannah understood the limitations, but it frustrated her nonetheless. Then we'll have to find those connections ourselves. She turned to Sarah. Can your media contacts dig into Harlow's financial and political relationships? Anything linking her to Clearwater or similar projects? Sarah was already typing on her laptop. On it. Miguel, Hannah continued, energized by this new challenge. We need to rally the community again. If Harlow wants to present herself as the reasonable voice of progress, we need to show that the people aren't buying it. Miguel nodded. I'll start making calls. James, Hannah corrected herself, turning to Bennett. Can we file for another injunction based on this new development? Argue that the federal investigation necessitates a complete halt to any related projects? Bennett considered this. Possibly. The criminal case against Williams and Parker doesn't automatically invalidate the development permits, but we might convince a judge that proceeding would interfere with an ongoing federal investigation. Agent Reeves watched this flurry of planning with a mixture of admiration and concern. Ms. Mackenzie, I appreciate your determination, but I need to remind you of the personal risk here. Pushing back against Harlow could escalate the threats against you and your family. Hannah met his gaze steadily. I'm well aware of the risks, Agent Reeves. But what's the alternative? Let them win. Let them build whatever they want on land they stole through corruption and intimidation. Allow a potential security threat to our country to proceed just because standing against it is dangerous? Her parents exchanged worried glances, but neither contradicted her. They had come to accept that their daughter wouldn't back down. It wasn't in her nature. At minimum, Reeves insisted, we need to move you and your family to a more secure location. This farm is too isolated, too difficult to properly protect. No, Robert said firmly, surprising everyone. This is our home. 4 generations of Mackenzies have lived and worked this land. If we leave now, they win, regardless of what happens with the development. Ellen nodded in agreement. We're staying. Just help us stay safely." Agent Reeves sighed, recognizing the same stubborn determination in the parents that he saw in their daughter. "We'll increase the security detail and bring in some additional equipment, but you'll need to follow protocols precisely. No exceptions." As the group dispersed to their various tasks, Hannah stepped onto the porch for a moment of solitude. The morning sun cast long shadows across the fields that had been in her family for generations. Fields that, despite the governor's arrest and the exposed conspiracy, were still threatened. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. "Horizon Partnerships denies allegations, threatens legal action against defamation." Before she could process this, another alert appeared. "Acting Governor Harlow schedules meeting with Clearwater executives and Chinese investors for tomorrow." They were moving fast. Too fast for the normal wheels of justice to keep pace. Hannah realized they needed to change tactics. Going public with the evidence had brought down Williams, but the forces behind him were already adapting, installing new figureheads while continuing the same agenda. As she stared out at the land she was fighting to protect, Hannah made a decision. If the people behind Project Phoenix wanted to play in the shadows, then perhaps it was time to meet them there. Legal challenges and public protests might not be enough against opponents who could simply replace arrested conspirators with new ones. Her contemplation was interrupted by another agent, joining her on the porch. "Ms. Mackenzie, there's a call for you. Someone who says they have information about Lieutenant Governor Harlow and Horizon Partnerships. They're insisting on speaking only with you." Hannah took a deep breath and followed the agent inside. Whoever this mysterious caller was, she hoped they might provide the leverage she needed against their seemingly adaptable adversaries. What she couldn't know was that this call would pull her even deeper into a conspiracy that reached further than she had imagined, and that by day's end, everything would change again. Hannah took the secure phone from Agent Reeves with cautious anticipation. The kitchen had been cleared, except for Reeves and another agent who was monitoring the call for security purposes. Despite their assurances about encrypted lines and untraceable connections, Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, or at least listened to. "This is Hannah Mackenzie," she said, keeping her voice level. "Ms. Mackenzie." The voice was male, deliberately distorted by some kind of electronic filter. "I'm glad you agreed to speak with me. You can call me Carson." Hannah glanced at Reeves, who nodded encouragingly, but kept his expression neutral. "I'm told you have information about Lieutenant Governor Harlow and Horizon Partnerships. Direct and to the point. I appreciate that." The digital distortion couldn't hide the amusement in Carson's tone. "Yes, I have information. Critical information that the FBI doesn't have yet, despite their impressive resources." Hannah's eyes flicked to Reeves again, noting his slight frown. "And you're willing to share this information? Why, exactly?" "Let's just say we have aligned interests in this particular matter. Horizon's activities in your state have complications for certain American interests I'm associated with." "You work for a competing corporation?" Hannah guessed. A dry chuckle came through the line. "Nothing so mundane, Ms. Mackenzie, but my specific affiliation isn't relevant to our discussion. What is relevant is that Lieutenant Governor Harlow has been Horizon's inside person from the beginning. Williams was just the public face." Hannah sat straighter. "You have proof of this?" "I have everything. Financial transfers through offshore accounts, meeting logs, communications. Harlow was recruited 3 years ago during a trade mission to Beijing. She's been their primary asset in your state government ever since. Why tell me this? Why not take it directly to the FBI?" There was a pause. "Let's just say my position makes official channels complicated. But you've proven yourself effective, resourceful, and most importantly, publicly credible. People believe you, Ms. Mackenzie. When you speak, they listen." Hannah wasn't buying it. "You want to use me as your mouthpiece." I want to provide you with the ammunition you need to stop a project that threatens both your community and national security interests. Our motivations may differ, but our goal is the same. Hannah considered this, trying to read between the lines. If your information is so valuable, why not publish it anonymously? Why reach out to me personally? Because documents can be dismissed as forgeries. Whistleblower claims can be discredited. But you, the farmer's daughter standing up to corruption, you've captured the public's imagination. You're the face of this fight now, whether you intended to be or not. Reeves passed Hannah a note. Careful. Could be manipulation and entrapment. Hannah nodded slightly to show she understood. Let's say I'm interested. How would this work? There's a storage unit at Midway Self-Storage on Route 16, Unit 237. The access code is 4729. Inside you'll find everything you need. Documents, data drives, recordings, enough to bring down Harlow and force a federal shutdown of the entire Clearwater operation. Hannah's pulse quickened, despite her skepticism. And what do you want in exchange? Only that certain details remain private. Information pertaining to U.S. intelligence assets and operations should be handed directly to Agent Reeves for proper classified handling. The rest you can use however you see fit. Reeves was already shaking his head, mouthing, "It's a trap." Hannah shared his concern but wasn't ready to dismiss the opportunity outright. "I'll need to think about this." "Of course, but don't think too long. Harlow is meeting with Horizon representatives tomorrow at 3 p.m. By evening, they'll have a new agreement in place to fast-track the project under a different corporate entity, one without Clearwater's baggage. The storage unit contents won't matter after those papers are signed." "How do you know their schedule?" "The same way I know that Agent Reeves is standing 3 feet away from you, looking concerned, and that your parents are currently speaking with Agent Mercer on your front porch about increasing perimeter security." Hannah felt a chill run down her spine. Reeves immediately signaled to his colleague, who slipped out of the room, presumably to check on her parents and alert the security team. "Who are you, really?" Hannah demanded. "An ally for now. That's all you need to know. Storage Unit 237, code 4729. You have until tomorrow afternoon." The line went dead. Reeves immediately took the phone. "We need to trace that call and sweep the entire property for surveillance devices. I don't like this, Ms. Mackenzie, not one bit." "Neither do I," Hannah admitted. "But what if he's telling the truth about Harlow? We can't ignore that possibility." "It's textbook manipulation," Reeves countered. "Create urgency. Offer valuable information with minimal risk to yourself. Suggest insider knowledge to establish credibility. This Carson is playing you." "To what end?" "To get you to that storage unit, where any number of scenarios could play out. None of them good." Hannah paced the kitchen. "But we could send a team to check it out first, right? Make sure it's not a trap?" Reeves hesitated. "Technically, we'd need a warrant. Without probable cause. People are trying to build a foreign intelligence operation on my family's farm." Hannah interrupted. "I'd say that's probable cause for just about anything." "It's not that simple," Reeves said, though she could see him considering options. "Look, let me make some calls. Maybe we can get a cooperative judge to fast-track a warrant based on the existing case. But Hannah," he rarely used her first name, "please promise me you won't go running off to that storage unit on your own." "I promise," she said, meaning it. She wasn't foolish enough to walk into what could very well be a trap. 3 hours later, Hannah sat in the farm's living room with her core team, her parents, Sarah, Miguel, and Bennett, as Reeves briefed them on developments. "We sent a unit to check out the storage facility," he explained. "Unit 237 exists, but it's registered to a shell company that's practically untraceable. We're still working on the warrant to open it legally." "And Carson?" Sarah asked. "No luck tracing the call. It was bounced through multiple proxies. Whoever he is, he knows what he's doing." Reeves looked troubled. We did sweep your property for surveillance devices. Found two audio devices in your kitchen and living room, and a long-range camera positioned in the tree line with a view of your front door." Ellen gasped. "Someone's been watching us for how long?" "The equipment is sophisticated, military grade, not something your average corporate security team would have access to." Bennett frowned. "You think it's U.S. intelligence, monitoring Hannah because of what she knows?" "Or foreign intelligence," Reeves acknowledged reluctantly. "We simply don't know yet." Hannah tried to process this disturbing revelation. "What about the Harlow meeting tomorrow? Was Carson telling the truth about that?" Reeves nodded. "That part checks out. Harlow has a closed-door meeting scheduled for 3 p.m. tomorrow with several unnamed economic development partners. We've been trying to get details on who's attending, but it's being kept unusually secure." "So he was telling the truth about that," Hannah mused. "Maybe he's telling the truth about the rest, too. Or feeding you just enough verifiable information to make the trap convincing," Reeves countered. The group fell into troubled silence, weighing their limited options. "What if," Miguel suggested hesitantly, "what if we created a distraction? Something to disrupt Harlow's meeting before any papers can be signed?" Sarah perked up. "A protest? We could mobilize everyone who supported us against Williams. Show up outside the Capitol during the meeting." "They'll be expecting that," Bennett warned. "Security will be prepared." "Not a protest," Hannah said slowly, an idea forming. "A press conference, our own press conference, scheduled for the same time, where we announce significant new evidence about Harlow's connections to Horizon." "But we don't have that evidence," Robert pointed out. "They don't know that," Hannah countered, "and neither does the press. If we announce it, Harlow will have to respond. At minimum, it would disrupt her meeting, force her to address the allegations. It might even smoke out our mysterious Carson, force him to either deliver the promised evidence or show his hand." Bennett nodded appreciatively. "A strategic bluff. It could work." "And if it doesn't?" Ellen asked, concern etched on her face. "Then we're no worse off than we are now," Hannah reasoned. Reeves had been listening silently, his expression unreadable. "It's risky," he said finally. "But it might buy us the time we need to get into that storage unit legally and determine what's really going on." They spent the next hour planning the details. Sarah would coordinate with media contacts to ensure maximum coverage. Miguel would rally community supporters to create a substantial presence, and Bennett would draft a compelling statement hinting at devastating evidence without making specific claims that could later be challenged. As the others dispersed to their tasks, Reeves pulled Hannah aside. "I know what you're thinking," he said quietly. "What am I thinking, Agent Reeves?" "That despite your promise, you might need to check out that storage unit yourself if our warrant doesn't come through in time." Hannah didn't deny it. "We're running out of options." "Which is exactly what someone wants you to believe." Reeves sighed deeply. "Look, I understand your frustration, but rushing in could make everything worse. Trust the process. Trust us." "I'm trying," Hannah replied honestly. "But I've seen how these powerful interests operate. They're always 3 steps ahead, always finding new angles, new figureheads. Sometimes the process is too slow to catch up." Reeves studied her for a long moment. "Just don't do anything without talking to me first. Please." Hannah nodded, though they both knew it wasn't quite a promise. As dusk settled over the farm, Hannah stood on the porch watching the FBI agents patrol the perimeter of their property. The weight of everything they'd learned about Project Phoenix, about the surveillance, about Harlow's potential involvement, pressed down on her. Their little farm had somehow become the center of an international conspiracy, and she had placed her family directly in the crosshairs. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Decision time, Ms. Mackenzie. Unit 237 awaits. Come alone or don't come at all." Hannah stared at the message, her finger hovering over the option to show it to Reeves. Instead, she deleted it and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Some decisions couldn't be made by committee. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Hannah knew that tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. Darkness had fully settled over the Mackenzie farm when Hannah slipped out her bedroom window. She'd waited until the house fell quiet, until her parents' light went out and the FBI agents had completed their hourly perimeter check. She knew she had precisely 18 minutes before the next sweep. She'd left a note on her pillow, not because she expected anyone to find it before morning, but because she couldn't bear the thought of disappearing without explanation if things went wrong. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her shoulders as she made her way through the shadows to the old maintenance shed where her father kept his restored 1976 motorcycle. Hannah had been riding since she was 16. Robert had taught her on this very bike, insisting that every farm kid should know how to handle a motorcycle for those times when the truck was unavailable or the roads were too muddy. Tonight, she was grateful for that education. The motorcycle was quiet compared to a car, easier to navigate on back roads and, most importantly, didn't require her to take the keys from their hook in the kitchen where an agent might notice. As she pushed the bike a safe distance from the house before starting it, Hannah second-guessed herself for the 100th time. She was potentially walking into a trap, defying FBI instructions and risking not just her safety but potentially the entire case against Clearwater and Project Phoenix. But the alternative, waiting for a warrant that might come too late if at all, seemed worse. Tomorrow afternoon, Harlow would sign new agreements with Horizon Partnerships, and they'd be back to square one. Hannah reached the main road and started the motorcycle, keeping the speed modest to reduce noise. The FBI agents watching the farm might hear it, but with luck, they'd mistake it for a passing vehicle on the nearby county road. She took a circuitous route toward Route 16, avoiding the main highways where agents might be stationed. The night air was cool against her face as she rode, the stars brilliant overhead in the clear country sky. Midway Self-Storage appeared as a series of low utilitarian buildings surrounded by chain-link fencing, illuminated by harsh security lights. Hannah parked the motorcycle behind a neighboring gas station and approached on foot, surveying the facility from the shadows. No obvious surveillance, no suspicious vehicles. The night attendance booth was lit, but appeared empty, typical for these budget operations where staff often worked multiple facilities. Hannah's heart pounded as she punched in the gate code Carson had provided. To her surprise, it worked. The gate slid open with a mechanical whir that seemed deafening in the quiet night. She slipped inside, staying close to the buildings and away from the security lights. Unit 237 was located in the back row, partially obscured from the main entrance. Hannah approached cautiously, every sense alert for signs of danger. When she reached the unit, she hesitated, her hand hovering over the keypad. This was her last chance to turn back, to call Reeves and admit what she was doing. Instead, she entered the code, 4729. The padlock clicked open. Hannah held her breath as she lifted the rolling door, wincing at its metallic rattle. The unit's interior was dark. She pulled out her phone, switched on its flashlight, and scanned the space. It was mostly empty except for a single metal briefcase positioned in the center of the concrete floor. No tripwires, no obvious surveillance equipment, no lurking assailants. Still, Hannah's caution remained high as she approached the case. It wasn't locked. Inside, neatly organized, were exactly what Carson had promised: folders of documents, several USB drives, and what appeared to be a small recording device. A single note lay on top, typed on plain white paper. As promised, handle with care. Some knowledge is dangerous. Hannah quickly photographed the note and the case's contents before gathering everything. She had just closed the briefcase when she heard cars pulling into the facility's parking lot, multiple vehicles moving quickly, with purpose. Heart racing, Hannah killed her phone's light and edged to the unit's entrance. Through a narrow gap in the door, she saw 3 black SUVs and what appeared to be a tactical team deploying. Not FBI. They moved differently, with a precision that spoke of specialized training. Private military contractors, perhaps. Hannah ducked back inside, frantically searching for another exit. There was none. The storage unit had concrete walls on 3 sides and the roll-up door on the 4th. She was trapped. Voices approached, clipped, professional commands being issued. Hannah glanced up and noticed a small maintenance hatch in the ceiling, likely providing access to electrical wiring or ventilation. It was her only chance. Using some empty plastic bins left in the corner of the unit, Hannah constructed a makeshift ladder. The hatch opened with difficulty, rusty from disuse. She hoisted herself up, clutching the briefcase, and squeezed through the narrow opening into a cramped maintenance space between the unit's ceiling and roof. Below, she heard the storage unit door being raised fully. Flashlight beams swept the interior. Hannah held her breath, trying to control her ragged breathing and hammering heart. "Clear," a voice announced. "But someone's been here recently. Search the entire facility." Hannah remained motionless as the team methodically checked nearby units. From her hiding place, she couldn't see them, but she could track their movements by their voices and flashlight beams penetrating through small gaps in the ceiling panels. "Sir, we found a motorcycle parked behind the gas station. Engine's still warm. Lock down the entire area. 5-block radius. She can't have gone far." They knew who they were looking for. This wasn't a routine security check or random patrol. They were hunting specifically for her. Hannah's phone vibrated silently in her pocket. She carefully extracted it, shielding its screen against her body to minimize light leakage. A text from Carson. "Roof access. Northwest corner. Black sedan waiting on Murphy Street." How did he know she was here? How did he know she was on the roof? Was he watching her? Was he one of the men below? Hannah had no good options. If she stayed, she'd eventually be found. If she tried to escape across the roof, she might be spotted. If she went to the sedan, assuming it existed, she'd be placing herself at the mercy of someone she didn't know or trust. But the briefcase contained information that could potentially stop Project Phoenix for good. She couldn't let it be confiscated. Making her decision, Hannah began crawling through the cramped space toward what she hoped was the northwest corner, using the dim light of her phone screen to avoid electrical wiring and support beams. The metal briefcase made the journey awkward, but she refused to leave it behind. She found a roof access hatch secured by a simple latch. Below, she could hear the search intensifying, teams reporting in, frustration mounting in their voices. With trembling fingers, Hannah unlatched the hatch and pushed it open. The night air hit her face as she cautiously emerged onto the flat roof of the storage facility. From this vantage point, she could see the tactical team's vehicles and the surrounding streets. And there on Murphy Street, just as Carson had promised, idled a black sedan with darkened windows. Moving in a low crouch to minimize her silhouette, Hannah made her way across the roof to the northwest corner. There was a maintenance ladder bolted to the exterior wall, rusty and old, but functional. She slung the briefcase over her shoulder and began her descent, hyper-aware that a single spotlight in her direction would expose her completely. She reached the ground and pressed herself against the wall, hidden from the main parking lot by a dumpster enclosure. Murphy Street was just 50 yards away, across an open stretch of gravel and scrub grass. Taking a deep breath, Hannah sprinted across the exposed ground, expecting at any moment to hear shouts or see flashlight beams swing in her direction. Somehow, she made it. The sedan's rear door opened as she approached. Hannah hesitated for a split second before diving inside, clutching the briefcase to her chest. The door closed behind her almost instantly, and the car accelerated smoothly away from the scene. In the darkened interior, Hannah could make out only the silhouette of a driver, separated by a privacy partition. The back seat contained just one other passenger, a middle-aged man in a nondescript suit, his face half illuminated by the passing streetlights. "Hello, Ms. Mackenzie," he said calmly. "I'm Carson. You've had quite an evening." "Who are those men back there?" Hannah demanded, still breathless from her escape. "Who are you, really?" "Those men work for Horizon's American security contractor, former Special Forces operators now employed by a private military company called Argent Strategic. As for me..." He produced an identification card and held it where she could see it clearly when they passed under the next streetlight. "I'm with the Defense Intelligence Agency." Hannah stared at the ID, her mind racing to process this new information. "You're U.S. military intelligence? Then why all the secrecy? Why not work with the FBI?" Carson tucked the ID away. "Because, Ms. Mackenzie, this situation is considerably more complicated than it appears. Certain elements within our own government have competing interests regarding Project Phoenix. Not everyone wants it shut down." The sedan turned onto the highway, heading away from town. "Where are we going?" Hannah asked, suddenly aware of her vulnerability. "Somewhere safe to examine what you've recovered. That briefcase contains information that could compromise multiple intelligence operations, both foreign and domestic." "I don't understand," Hannah said, her voice hardening. "If you're U.S. intelligence, why not just arrest Harlow and the Horizon representatives? Why involve me at all?" Carson's expression remained neutral. "Because without irrefutable public evidence, certain protections apply to sitting government officials. And because some operations require public exposure, while others necessitate absolute secrecy. You've become a useful intersection of those requirements." Hannah clutched the briefcase tighter. "I'm not just going to hand this over to you, not until I understand exactly what's happening." To her surprise, Carson smiled slightly. "I'd be disappointed if you did. Your judgment and determination are precisely why I contacted you." He checked his watch. "We have approximately 6 hours before your absence is discovered. In that time, we need to review those documents, extract what you can use publicly, secure what must remain classified, and get you back to your farm, preferably with a convincing explanation for your nighttime adventure." The sedan continued through the night, carrying Hannah deeper into a world of shadows and secrets she had never imagined existed beneath the surface of her ordinary life. Whatever was in that briefcase, she sensed it would change everything. Again. The safe house was a nondescript ranch-style home in a middle-class suburb about an hour from the Mackenzie farm. Nothing about its beige exterior or modest landscaping suggested it was a government intelligence facility, which Hannah supposed was precisely the point. Inside, the living room had been converted into an impromptu command center with secure laptops, communication equipment, and multiple monitors displaying surveillance feeds from various locations, including, Hannah noticed with a chill, the exterior of her family's farmhouse. "You've been watching us all along," she said, not bothering to hide her anger. "Not me personally," Carson replied, directing her to a dining table where they could examine the briefcase contents. "But yes, your family has been under surveillance since you first came forward with evidence against Williams. Initially by Clearwater's security team, then by the FBI, and eventually by several other interested parties, including the DIA. It wasn't a question. Carson nodded, pulling on latex gloves before opening the briefcase. Project Phoenix drew our attention nearly a year ago, but we've been monitoring similar operations across multiple states. Your case provided a unique opportunity to get inside Horizon's network." Hannah watched as he methodically removed and organized the documents. "So, I'm what? Your unwitting asset?" "More of a fortuitous alignment of interests," Carson countered. "You wanted to save your farm. We wanted to uncover a foreign intelligence operation on American soil. Our objectives complemented each other." Hannah wasn't satisfied with this explanation, but the contents of the briefcase quickly demanded her full attention. The documents were startling in their scope and detail. Financial records showing millions flowing from Horizon partnerships, through various shell companies into accounts controlled by Lieutenant Governor Harlow, technical specifications for surveillance equipment to be installed throughout the Project Phoenix facilities, and communications between Harlow and her Horizon handlers dating back nearly 3 years. "She's been working for them all along," Hannah murmured, examining emails where Harlow had provided confidential state economic development plans to her Chinese contacts. Williams was just the public face. "Precisely," Carson confirmed. Williams was corrupt, but his motivation was primarily financial. Harlow is something else entirely, a cultivated asset with long-term strategic value. A particular document caught Hannah's eye, a detailed map of the Project Phoenix installation planned for the Mackenzie farm and surrounding properties. It bore little resemblance to both the public luxury development plans and the industrial facility blueprints they'd discovered earlier. "What am I looking at?" she asked, studying the complex schematics. Carson pointed to various sections of the facility. On the surface, it appears to be a data center and logistics hub, which it partially is. But these areas here and here are designed for signals intelligence collection. These other sections house what they're calling research facilities, but are actually equipment for monitoring and potentially intercepting communications from key infrastructure throughout the region. Including military installations, Hannah realized, noting the proximity to several bases marked on the map. And government facilities, transportation networks, telecommunications infrastructure, Carson added. Project Phoenix isn't just one site. It's part of a nationwide network of similar installations strategically positioned near sensitive locations. Hannah processed this information, the true scale of the conspiracy finally becoming clear. So, when Harlow meets with the Horizon representatives tomorrow, she'll be finalizing agreements for what amounts to a foreign intelligence collection facility on American soil, disguised as a commercial development. Carson's expression darkened, which is why certain elements of our government want the project stopped, while others are content to let it proceed under surveillance. "I don't understand," Hannah said. "Why would anyone in our government want this to happen?" Carson hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. Some agencies believe allowing the project to proceed under close monitoring provides a unique opportunity to feed disinformation to a foreign adversary or to study their collection methods. Others see it as an unacceptable security risk that must be eliminated immediately. And which side are you on? The side that believes American citizens shouldn't have their land seized through corrupt means to facilitate foreign espionage, Carson replied evenly. But my personal opinion isn't relevant. What matters is what you do with this information. He gestured to the documents spread across the table. Some of this, particularly the financial transactions and Harlow's communications with Horizon, can be made public. Other elements, he indicated the technical specifications and certain operational details, are classified, and their release would potentially compromise national security. Hannah understood the implied message. So I get enough evidence to stop Harlow and Project Phoenix, but not enough to expose the full extent of the operation or the debate within our own government. Precisely, Carson confirmed. You get what you need, we get what we need. Mutual benefit. For the next 2 hours, they meticulously sorted through the material, making copies of documents Hannah could use and securing those too sensitive for public release. Carson provided context for the financial records that would make them most damaging to Harlow, while Hannah identified which elements would resonate most strongly with the media and public. As they worked, a young woman whom Carson introduced only as Analyst Chen helped organize the electronic files from the USB drives, occasionally offering insights on the Chinese communications included in the cache. Lieutenant Governor Harlow is referred to by a code name in these messages, Chen noted, showing Hannah a translated document. They call her Jade Gate, a reference to her role as an access point to American infrastructure and resources. Will this be enough to stop her? Hannah asked as they finished their work, looking at the considerably smaller pile of documents she would be permitted to take. To stop Project Phoenix, yes, Carson assured her. To fully expose the network behind it, that's a more complex proposition. Horizon Partnerships is itself merely a front for organizations with considerably more resources and patience. Hannah checked her watch. Almost 4 a.m. I need to get back before anyone realizes I'm gone. Carson nodded. Our team will return you to the vicinity of your farm. But first, he slid a small device across the table. This is for you. Hannah examined what appeared to be an ordinary smartphone. What is it? A secure communication device, Carson explained. It connects through encrypted channels that can't be easily monitored. If you need to contact me, and only if absolutely necessary, use this phone. Hannah pocketed the device, uncertain whether to feel reassured or further entangled in this web of espionage and secrecy. What happens after tomorrow? After we stop Harlow? Carson's expression remained unreadable. That depends partly on your next moves. The documents you're taking will create a significant public scandal, but powerful interests will attempt to contain the damage. How far the revelations spread depends on how effectively you leverage public opinion. And my family? Will we be safe? Safer than you are now, he replied, not quite answering her question. Exposing Harlow shifts attention away from you personally, but I wouldn't plan any international travel for the foreseeable future. An operative appeared in the doorway. Transport is ready, sir. The return journey took place in silence, Hannah's mind racing with everything she had learned. The sedan dropped her a quarter-mile from her family's farm, the driver handing her a small backpack containing the selected documents and a motorcycle helmet. Your bike has been relocated here, he informed her, indicating where the motorcycle was hidden behind a cluster of trees. The FBI perimeter sensors have been temporarily looped to allow your return. You have approximately 15 minutes before systems reset. Hannah stared at him. You can do that? Override FBI security? The driver merely nodded and pulled away, leaving Hannah alone in the pre-dawn darkness. She made it back to the farm without incident, easing the motorcycle into the maintenance shed and slipping through her bedroom window just as the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon. As she hid the backpack under her bed, Hannah heard movement in the hallway. Her mother, already awake and starting her day. Hannah quickly changed into pajamas and mussed her hair to look as though she'd been sleeping. When Ellen knocked softly and peeked in, Hannah pretended to wake groggily. Morning, sweetheart, Ellen said. Rough night? You were tossing and turning when I checked on you earlier. Hannah felt a flicker of guilt at the deception. Just anxious about today. Her mother nodded sympathetically. Agent Reeves is already here. Says he has news about the warrant for that storage unit. Hannah's heart skipped a beat. I'll be right down. In the kitchen, Reeves was nursing a cup of coffee while discussing security arrangements with another agent. He looked up as Hannah entered, his expression revealing nothing about whether he suspected her nighttime adventure. Morning, Ms. Mackenzie. Good news. We secured the warrant for the storage unit. A team is heading there now. That's great, Hannah managed, wondering what they would find in the now empty unit. We also got confirmation about Lieutenant Governor Harlow's meeting today, Reeves continued. 3 representatives from Horizon Partnerships, plus their legal team. The meeting is scheduled for 3 p.m., as your mysterious caller indicated. Hannah nodded, trying to appear appropriately interested but not too knowledgeable. And our press conference? Set for 2:30 p.m. at the county courthouse steps, Sarah reported, entering the kitchen with her laptop. We've got confirmations from all major state news outlets plus 2 national networks. Miguel says we'll have at least 100 community supporters present. Perfect, Hannah said, her confidence growing. With the documents from Carson, they had more than enough to derail Harlow's plans and expose Project Phoenix. By mid-morning, the farm was bustling with activity. Bennett arrived to help Hannah prepare her statement, while Sarah coordinated with media contacts and Miguel organized transportation for supporters. FBI agents maintained their perimeter, though Hannah noticed they seemed more relaxed than the previous day, unaware that their security had been compromised overnight. Shortly before noon, Reeves returned from the storage facility, his expression troubled. He pulled Hannah aside, speaking in low tones. "The unit was empty," he reported. "Completely cleaned out. But we found evidence it had been recently accessed, and there was a confrontation of some kind, not at the unit itself, but somewhere on the property. Security cameras were disabled, but a witness reported seeing multiple vehicles and what sounded like a pursuit." Hannah feigned surprise. "Do you think it was Carson? Or someone trying to get to the evidence before us?" "Hard to say," Reeves replied, studying her face carefully. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about this, would you, Miss Mackenzie?" Hannah met his gaze steadily. "I've been here all night, Agent Reeves. Ask my parents or your agents." He didn't look entirely convinced, but nodded nonetheless. "Well, whatever was in that unit is gone now. I hope it wasn't critical to our case." "I think we have enough," Hannah said, thinking of the backpack hidden under her bed. "More than enough, actually." As Reeves moved away to confer with his team, Hannah's phone, her regular phone, not the secure one from Carson, buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Just got word Harlow has moved her meeting up to 2 p.m. They must know we're planning something." Hannah felt a surge of urgency. They needed to move faster. "Change of plans," she announced to the room. "We need to be ready to leave for the courthouse by 1 p.m. at the latest. Harlow's trying to outmaneuver us." As the team scrambled to adjust their timeline, Hannah slipped away to retrieve the backpack of documents. Today would determine whether their fight had been worth it, whether the truth about Project Phoenix would finally be exposed, or whether the forces behind it would once again adapt and continue their plans under a different guise. Either way, Hannah knew there was no going back to the simple life she had once known. Too many powerful players were now aware of her, both as a threat and as a potential asset. The question was no longer whether she could save her family's farm, but whether she could navigate the dangerous waters of international espionage and government intrigue without being swept away entirely. As she prepared for what might be the most important confrontation of her life, Hannah found herself wondering what other secrets might be buried beneath the surface of ordinary American communities like hers, and who else might be fighting shadows most citizens never even knew existed. The county courthouse steps were packed with people by 1:30 p.m., supporters carrying homemade signs, journalists jostling for position, curious onlookers drawn by the commotion. Hannah stood slightly apart, reviewing her notes one final time, while Sarah coordinated with the technical team setting up the microphones, and Bennett conferred with Miguel about crowd management. FBI agents maintained a discreet perimeter, with Reeves never straying far from Hannah's side. He'd been watching her carefully since returning from the storage unit, clearly suspecting she knew more than she was letting on. "Nervous?" he asked quietly. Hannah looked up from her notes. "Wouldn't you be? You seem remarkably composed for someone about to publicly accuse the acting governor of treason." "Not treason," Hannah corrected. "Corruption, foreign influence, abuse of power, but technically not treason." Reeves raised an eyebrow. "That's a very precise legal distinction for someone who didn't go to the storage unit last night." Before Hannah could respond, Sarah rushed over, excitement evident in her face. "You're not going to believe this. Harlow's coming here." "What?" Hannah and Reeves said simultaneously. Sarah nodded vigorously. "My contact at the Capitol just called. Harlow apparently changed her plans again. Instead of meeting with the Horizon representatives at the governor's office, she's heading here to address baseless allegations and confront her accusers directly." "It's a preemptive move," Bennett said, joining them. "She's trying to seize the narrative, portray herself as transparently confronting unfounded claims." "Or it's a trap," Reeves countered. "Get Hannah to make accusations publicly without presenting evidence first, then sue for defamation. Hannah considered these possibilities, then shook her head. No. This is good. Better than good. It's perfect. We'll have her here, on camera, when we reveal everything. Speaking of which, Bennett said quietly, is it time to bring out that evidence you've been hinting at all morning? Hannah nodded and handed him a USB drive containing copies of the most damning documents. Get these to the technical team. Make sure they're ready to display them on the screens when I give the signal. As Bennett hurried away, Hannah caught sight of a commotion at the edge of the courthouse plaza. A convoy of official vehicles had arrived, and Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Harlow was emerging from the lead car, surrounded by staff and security. She wore a crisp navy suit and a confident smile that didn't quite reach her eyes as she surveyed the crowd. Showtime, Hannah murmured. The next 30 minutes unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Harlow's team set up their own press area on the opposite side of the courthouse steps, creating a symbolic standoff. News crews scrambled to position themselves to capture both sides. The crowd, sensing the dramatic confrontation brewing, grew larger and more energized. At precisely 2 p.m., Hannah stepped up to the microphones. A hush fell over the plaza as cameras swiveled toward her. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. 3 months ago, my family received a notice that our farm, land that has been in the Mackenzie family for 4 generations, was being seized through eminent domain to make way for the Clearwater Estates development. What began as a fight to save our home quickly revealed something far more sinister. Across the plaza, Harlow watched with a practiced neutral expression, occasionally whispering to her chief of staff. We've already seen Governor Williams and executives from Clearwater Development arrested on federal corruption charges, Hannah continued. But today I'm here to reveal that the corruption goes much deeper, and the true nature of the so-called Clearwater Estates project poses a direct threat to our community and our national security. A murmur ran through the crowd. Hannah nodded to the technical team, and the first document appeared on the large screens flanking the podium, financial records showing payments from Horizon Partnerships to accounts controlled by Harlow. These records, which have been verified by financial experts and provided to federal investigators, show that Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Harlow has received over $2 million from Horizon Partnerships, a company with direct ties to foreign intelligence agencies, while using her position to fast-track their projects and override regulatory concerns. Harlow's composed facade cracked slightly. She conferred urgently with her staff, who appeared increasingly agitated. Hannah continued, methodically presenting document after document, building an irrefutable case that Harlow had been working as a paid agent of influence for years, that Project Phoenix was designed as a surveillance facility rather than a residential development, and that the seizure of family farms was merely a means to acquire strategically valuable land. As the evidence mounted, Harlow's team abandoned their press setup and retreated toward their vehicles. Hannah, seeing this, raised her voice. Lieutenant Governor Harlow, you came here to confront baseless allegations. Will you now flee from documented evidence of your corruption? The crowd parted as Harlow, visibly shaken but still attempting to maintain her dignity, approached Hannah's podium. News cameras followed her every step, capturing what was quickly becoming a historic confrontation. These documents are clearly fabricated, Harlow declared, though her voice lacked conviction. This is nothing but a desperate attempt to block economic progress and jobs for our community. Hannah met her gaze steadily. Then you won't mind explaining why your signature appears on classified documents designating Project Phoenix as a special access facility with restricted areas specifically designed for signals intelligence collection. She nodded again to the technical team, who displayed the blueprint with Chinese characters that Carson had explained the previous night. The crowd gasped as an English translation of the labels appeared, clearly indicating surveillance capabilities in restricted areas. Harlow's face drained of color. These are confidential documents, Their release is illegal. More illegal than selling out American communities to foreign interests? Hannah countered. More illegal than using corrupt officials to seize private property for a surveillance operation disguised as economic development. Before Harlow could respond, a commotion erupted at the edge of the plaza. Federal agents, not FBI, Hannah noted, but a different agency, were moving purposefully toward the lieutenant governor. Agent Reeves stepped forward, apparently as surprised as anyone by their appearance. Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Harlow, the lead agent announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent plaza. I am Special Agent Wilson with the Counterintelligence Division. You're under arrest for violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, conspiracy, and multiple counts of corruption. What followed was chaos. Journalists shouting questions, supporters cheering, Harlow's security detail arguing with federal agents. Through it all, Hannah stood at the podium, watching as the lieutenant governor was escorted to a waiting vehicle, her political career and Project Phoenix crumbling simultaneously. As the tumult began to subside, Hannah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find her father standing beside her, pride evident in his weathered face. "You did it," he said simply. Hannah smiled, exhaustion finally catching up with her now that the adrenaline was fading. "We did it, Dad. All of us." The aftermath unfolded rapidly over the following days. Federal agents seized documents from Harlow's office and home, uncovering even more extensive connections to Horizon partnerships. The eminent domain orders for the Mackenzie farm and neighboring properties were rescinded by emergency court order. Horizon's representatives quietly left the country as multiple federal agencies launched investigations into their activities across several states. A week after the courthouse confrontation, Hannah sat on the porch of the farmhouse, watching the sunset paint the fields in golden light. The FBI security detail had finally been withdrawn, though Reeves had warned her to remain vigilant. The media frenzy had begun to subside, allowing the family some semblance of normalcy. Sarah joined her, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. "How does it feel? Being the farmer's daughter who brought down a governor, a lieutenant governor, and an international espionage operation?" Hannah accepted the drink with a grateful smile. "Surreal. Sometimes I wonder if any of it really happened." "Oh, it happened all right," Sarah assured her. "They're already talking about making a movie." Hannah laughed. "Please tell me you said no." "Of course I did. For now, anyway." Sarah's expression turned more serious. "Have you heard from your friend Carson?" Hannah glanced instinctively at the secure phone hidden in her bedroom. "No. I don't expect to unless something else happens." "Do you think it's over? Truly over?" Hannah watched as the last rays of sunlight illuminated the fields her family had tilled for generations, fields that would remain in their care, at least for now. "This part is over," she said carefully. "Project Phoenix has been exposed. The immediate threat to our community neutralized. But the forces behind it? The network of influence that Horizon built? The competing agendas within our own government?" She shook her head. "No, that's not over. I'm not sure it ever will be." Sarah studied her friend with concern. "So what now? Back to normal life?" Hannah smiled, but there was a new awareness in her eyes, a recognition that she had glimpsed a shadow world most people never see, and that knowledge couldn't be unlearned. "As normal as it can be," she replied. "I'll help Dad with the harvest. Maybe finish that law degree I put on hold. Keep working with Miguel and the community to strengthen local oversight of development projects." What she didn't say was that she would also be watching for new shell companies acquiring land in strategic locations, for unusual construction projects, for the subtle signs that another Project Phoenix might be taking shape somewhere else. The secure phone would remain charged and hidden, a tangible reminder of her unwitting initiation into a world of secrets and countermeasures. As darkness settled over the Mackenzie farm, Hannah took comfort in what they had accomplished. When David had stood against multiple Goliaths, and somehow emerged victorious. The farm was safe, the community intact, the truth, at least part of it, revealed to the world. For now, that would have to be enough. In the distance, headlights appeared on the long driveway, Robert returning from town with supplies. Life continued. The fields would need tending in the morning, regardless of international conspiracies or intelligence operations. Hannah raised her glass in a silent toast to the land that had been worth fighting for, to the family that had stood with her, and to the future uncertain as it might be. Whatever came next, she would be ready.